Barry, nice to
Hello.
see you. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you very much.
I've missed you.
It's been a couple of days. No, it's been
We
longer than that, actually, hasn't it?
we literally did not coordinate this whole color thing either, which is fab, you know.
Oh, yes, I've see,
No,
that's the aesthetic I wouldn't notice.
I know. So look, Warrior Teachers Program. Let's talk about that, the winning mindset. Tell
Yeah,
me, because one of the things I was thinking is having a bit of a background as an academic, as you know, and having written a number of courses, this is a big thing, you know. Writing a course, coming up with all the concepts, breaking it all down, you know, recruiting all these people, running it, managing the process of quality assurance, the attrition, you know, outcomes, blah de blah. I'm really impressed. And I also think that in terms of what we're trying to do as a collective in the movement, there's huge, you know, place for this.
mm,
Um, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about it is I've obviously looked at the work that you're doing and I thought, okay, well, this is interesting, but I have questions because I'm not entirely clear why, where, how. So I thought it'd be nice to chat. So
okay. Yeah,
start
it's great.
start me off with what's your background and why did you kind of get to this point where you thought this was a good idea?
Well, I'm a teacher by profession,
Right.
um, adults, so andragogy, not pedagogy, not the teaching of children, the teaching of adults. It's a term that we use a lot on the course. So that's essentially why I'm interested because I've been doing it for many, many years. I'm 30 odd years now.
Mm,
And therefore, I'm committed to the idea that at the moment, education is all. And I think that's never true. I think I think the time of the teacher is coming.
mm,
And I think we'll begin to recognize that teaching is a very important endeavor. There was a great article, actually. I don't know whether you saw it, about those who can do and those who can't teach and what a myth it was. Which was, I think, on unheard in the last few days. It was very good. I was quite pleased to see that. And I think this concept of what a teacher is going to be up for grabs shortly. So I'm always about the education. I'm by nature. I mean, I'm
mm.
doing it all the time. Even when I'm not teaching, I'm teaching. You know, it's that kind. You're that kind. You sort of you hoard stuff and try to find patterns and then explain them to other people. Which just
Yeah, yeah. You're
I
a
think it's in our
translator
nature.
of information. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in our nature. So when I first got involved in this most ridiculous of worlds in which we both find ourselves now, it was not by design under any stretch of the imagination. I was plummeted into it in a number of ways, not least of all a bit of a fracas with a bunch of students, and then being told, you know, you're in the wrong, and everything else that we know follows from that, the
Mm,
cancellations and the losing of work and the ostracization. We know all this comes with it. And it was a smack in the face for me because I'd been very supportive previously of
mm,
the concept of trying to help people who had dysphoria live the life that they wish to live. So it was a real smack in the face, a complete 180-degree turn for me there. And then when I got involved, there was a huge period of time, probably 2 years, which was literally 40 to 60 hours a week of learning, of trying to understand what was going on, of listening to people in the field, of reading books, until eventually I wrote one of my own, which was completely insane because I was high as a kite on morphine when I wrote it.
right.
And then I then I wrote a second, which is a very short one. It's only about 30 pages, which is like a narrative for how do we end this, which was an argument for teaching being the solution.
Mm.
So that started, and then I bumped into someone on Twitter who I had a conversation with called Alex, who ran Gender Mapper, which maps genders
Oh yeah.
clinics in
Yeah, yeah.
America.
No gender mapper. Yeah.
And Alex said, "Look, is there nothing as a teacher you can do?" And I went away and thought about it and came back and said, "Look, if we can get the right people,
Mm,
I'll design the first month. We'll get them on it, and then we'll see how it goes from there. And I'll do each month as they say. This is okay. Let's keep going." Well, I never expected what to happen, but I said it would be 6 months originally. We got to 6 months, and they were horrified at the thought we were going to stop.
mm,
And I thought, well, we might have something here, you know. So, and I'm very glad to say that in month 9, which I saw them last month, they said, "Is there going to be a part 2?" So
mm,
we're actually looking at now what will be the next thing that comes. And I think what we're producing is the concept of looking after one's intellectual well-being as well as one would look after as much their mental or physical well-being, and
mm,
saying, look, I am going to dedicate 2 or 3 hours a month to a group learning situation in
mm,
which I can learn something new that will help me possibly achieve things that I want to achieve. So that's where it started. And the first session that we did, is very much what you would see if somebody, as a teacher like yourself, would have seen, the kind of thing that you would expect to see. So it was very much about what's the philosophy of the course. Well, the philosophy of the course is that we live in an ever expanding world in which our degree of knowledge is such that the more we take on board, the less we understand. The more we take on board, the less we understand.
Mm.
That we are now so absolutely hit by knowledge that you keep taking it on board, and all you end up with is more questions.
Mm.
So it was also about how do we as people live with that kind of ambiguity? Because we're not very good at living with ambiguity, but we are going to have to be. So I was teaching about that idea of living with ambiguity, the concept of how do we manage ourselves in a learning world, and then the concept of what's called punctuated equilibrium, which is really, that's a motivating factor for me that I stole from the world of biology.
Mm.
This idea that for 80% of the time evolution does nothing, and for 20% of the time it goes batshit la la, right? And everything happens. So there's like this sudden uptick. Well, I think we now live in a cultural and technological uptick as a mirror of the idea of punctuated equilibrium. So that's taught in the first session. So it's very much about saying, right, here's the philosophy behind this course. Here's what you are going to learn about. Here's what you're going to understand.
Mm.
And we then move from there to look at things like media analysis of film. So we do an analysis of Harold and Maude in order to understand the difference between equity and equality of opportunity. And then we move on from there to look at models of how people are behaving and models of what we're seeing in society. So it's very much about equipping people to cope with what I think is, to a certain degree, a very new world for many of us.
Mm. I think a lot of people don't really understand how we got to this point. And I certainly find even in people who I'm working with, they really have no idea how these bigger structural concepts fit together, certainly in terms of things like, critical social justice. I know we've spoken about this at length, and for instance, how it relates to the school programs and how it actually is sitting and running alongside gender ideology. So you're basically trying to sort of break everything down and give people a kind of a set of principles in which to argue and to be able to negotiate change.
Yes, very, very much so. So, for example, we look at how do you structure questions to enable answers that require thought. We talk about the Socratic method. So we look at that. How did Socrates use the Socratic method? And then we look at how to be persuasive. Right. So you're looking at the sets of skills that mean that when you sit down in a room with somebody, when it comes to this, you're likely to be one of the smartest people in the room.
Mm.
That's the aim, is to be the smartest people in the room, because the way that they've achieved what they've achieved is to look like they're the smartest people in the room. And to do that, they've invented their own language, which is what, the cobblers of critical social justice, or, it just, you read their stuff and it's just what people call word salad, don't they? They say word salad. So it's seeing past that and being able to see past that, but it's also about centering ourselves in the kind of world that we want to live in. So from the very beginning, the idea is that the first thing that begins is that you're male or you're female, and we start with that very, very basic idea, which was our first understanding of ourselves, really, as a species, and we anchor that. That's absolutely where we begin, and from that begins the categorization of the world that we're in. And what's happening with these critical social justice ideas is that they want to upset that categorization at various levels. So they're trying to pull apart the liberal idea of the world. Yep, the liberal idea of the world. And the reason, and how that's been allowed to happen, is because the liberal idea of the world has grasped onto these ideas and weakened itself.
Yeah.
Now, this sounds all very highbrow and very highfalutin and very difficult to get your head around. It's not on the course, because, of course, I've got 8 to 12 people, all of whom are of different abilities, most of whom have never taught in their life. So they're not teachers, per se.
It's important to say that these are not, even though it has the word teacher in it, it's in the broad spectrum.
It's in the broad
life teachers, not actual teachers.
We are creating warrior teachers.
Do you know? Sorry, carry on.
So the whole idea of the course really is to allow people to become more confident, more proficient, to understand more about how, in a world steeped in information and knowledge, how do you tiptoe through that but remain anchored? Because nothing is the way it was 5 years ago. Nothing. It's all up in the air. in this concept of punctuated equilibrium, which has been happening since about the 1980s.
Mm.
So it's gradually getting faster. It's not getting slower, it's getting faster. So it's how do you look through these problems of language and culture and understanding, and why is it happening in the first place?
Mm.
And you know, I mean, I firmly blame the universities, as you know.
Oh, me too. No, me too.
So that's where it started. Most
Mm.
people have got a handle on the fact that that's where it's come from. I think that's beginning to be
Yeah.
taken as read.
Mm.
What people haven't got the handle on is what do they say to their friend who's of 20 years,
Mm.
who appears to have taken this hook, line, and sinker. And do you remember in our chat with Robbie when he
Mm.
said, you know, there's 80% that aren't aware or don't know or don't care?
Mm.
They're the market, really, that the warrior teachers would speak to. So
Mm.
the warrior teachers are more than likely to already have a slight grasp on what's going on. They wouldn't
Mm.
just, somebody wouldn't just randomly go, I'm going to go on this. It seems like fun.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, this is something that people who already have a grasp but would like to become more proficient. And it was born out of, for God's sake, let's do something.
Mm.
No, because I was finding myself spending lots of time on social media, moaning and griping. And when I spoke to Alex, it was like, for God, let's just do something. Who knows if it'll work?
Mm.
You know, we still don't know if it'll work. I don't know if people are going to want to come on it anymore or keep going on it, or whether it'll die, you know,
Yeah.
after its first year. But at the moment, I'm getting some interest, but not much.
Mm.
You know, you expect to see a few people, but you'll get huge interest at the beginning and then people drop off.
Mm.
You get 50 people will say, yeah, sounds great, I'll come to the meeting, and 10 will turn up.
Mm.
So you're constantly trying to reach people and get them in. And but the really positive thing is I was absolutely certain that I didn't want to tie people in.
Mm.
There's a lot when you have a course, you know as well as I do, you normally
Yeah.
pay for the whole thing up front.
Mm.
You don't with this. If you want to leave after month one, you can leave.
Mm.
And that keeps me on my toes.
Mm.
Right. So I better be able to make them want to come back and want to understand more.
Mm.
Otherwise, they'll just not bother and won't pay me.
Mm.
Well, there you go. And having to pay for it as well. I got a lot of stick for that.
Mm.
A lot of stick. And I was like, no, I do this for a living. And
Mm.
secondly, it has to have value.
Mm.
It's got to have value for people. Otherwise, people will treat it
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's nobody.
That's a standard principle, isn't it? I mean, I love the idea of being able to, you know, slow everything down, and that is quite a skill to be able to break down the arguments in the face of such immense emotional pressure, because of course they will throw the whole book at you in terms of emotional manipulation, language play, you know, fake methodologically flawed studies, etc. You know, these types of takedowns are incredibly stressful. So I think being equipped with this type of you know, real I mean, I think it's a brilliant idea, Barry. I think that there's a huge place for this, and it's I don't think you're getting enough traction on it, you know, which is why I wanted to come and talk to you about it, because there's scope for doing many different things, but in order to move forward we need many different things.
Yeah.
And having these intense, difficult arguments is very, I mean, if I go into a school, for instance, and I have done this, where I've managed to penetrate to a significant level, where they'll say, okay, well, let's have a big conversation with multiple teachers. When I then try to break down, you know, a load of people throwing a load of emotional traction at me at once, it takes a huge amount of numerous abilities to be able to stay on track and to break down all of the stuff that they're bringing to you, because they have been programmed in many ways to believe these things through, you know, many different forms. So I think this is fantastic, you know, and the more people who do this, the better. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much for saying that. It's been wonderfully heartening to hear from my attendees how one of their daughters desisted,
Yeah.
and she believes that the course has a direct influence on that, as well as other things, obviously. And to get a phone call from two of them at Tel Aviv Pride in Israel, out leafleting gay men and telling them what's going on, you know,
Yeah.
or to hear from one of my mums in Sweden, who suddenly has just appeared on Swedish television discussing the topic. So, you know, they're going on to do other things as well.
Mm.
And I suppose the nice thing about it is everybody that's in a cohort gets to go into a WhatsApp group. So they've got each other, and then they're right, how did you do this? How did you do that? Or they'll come back and say, I tried to do this and this is what happened. Right. Then they want to know, why did it happen? Where did I go wrong? So there's this, you get a constant monthly feedback loop that allows you to hone what you do and to get better at it. And then they'll go in the group and go, right, I'm doing this. What do I need? And before you know it, there's 8 or 10 resources.
Mm.
And it's this wonderful collaborative nature of what it's doing, which is what we're trying to build. And I've got two of them that want to actually become teachers of warrior teachers. So that's another, that's another thing again. So
Mm.
it's trying to get people to recognize that it's not easy by any stretch of the imagination. So you see me for an hour or 2 hours on a monthly basis, and then you go away with your homework and you've got to watch a film, or you've got to watch an interview, or read an article, or whatever it may be. It's nothing too onerous at all.
Mm.
And then when we come back, you get to discuss it or talk about it, or say what you got from it or what you saw. But what you're essentially learning is my narrative, right? That won't necessarily be yours.
Mm.
That's not how this works anymore, right? Because these people don't deal in truth. Now
No.
we do. We deal in the truths, in so much as the Enlightenment was worth it. The scientific process matters, right? And that if you want to be listened to seriously, you better be able to, reference things like Robbie said again on our talk, and also that you're able to hold your own in a conversation. So it's very much about that, and it's very much about trying to make sure that you're more confident, because so much of this is about confidence, and people underestimate themselves because it feels like a new arena, because everything's been disrupted and blown up in the air. You feel like you're in a new arena, and sometimes people will react very strangely to this stuff. I was in the gym the other day and I got set upon by a bloke in the gym. He
In a
just
good
went
way
off
or a bad way?
a bad way. He just went
Okay.
off on this rant.
Right.
He said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I work helping, people to understand about wokery and gender nonsense." And he lost his gasket, started
Right.
ranting on about trans people. I was like, "I didn't mention trans people."
Right.
It's just, what are you talking about? So he just went off on one. And it also encourages people to do further study. So I don't go into the same depth as James Lindsay would. We've only got each other for 24 hours over the year. So I didn't go into any of the depth that James Lindsay would, but yet they'll come back to me and say, "I've just listened to James Lindsay and I understood it for the first time."
Right.
So it's like, we have to start somewhere. And I would say to people, this is where you start. This is the beginning. So you come on this, and then, it's like,
it'd be
does
useful
that make sense?
for things like EDI in the workplace, and trying to sort of
Yeah.
tackle some of those, because that's obviously your area of speciality as well, isn't it?
Well, there's
so-
very little EDI going on in the workplace in Britain. Most of it's DI,
Yeah.
right? So EDI, equality of opportunity, diversity of thought, inclusivity in action, or DI, diversity of immutable characteristics, inclusivity in the in-group, and equity, or equality of outcome. Most businesses are practicing DI, not EDI, which is extraordinary, because DI is the antithesis of being in business. That's what the managing directors don't get. I could do with a few of them. They don't get it. They don't get that what they are introducing is a parasite that is designed to bring down their business. That's what it's for. The thieves of time, I call them, because that's what they do. They steal time.
Indeed. Well, look, good luck with it. I hope that it's incredibly successful.
Thank you.
I know you're making some polishing up your website and getting all of that ship shape and everything. And
I mean, it's a difficult one, because when it's just you trying to get something off the ground, there's a list of things from 1 to 100.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to get something on the website that people might read, but we've talked about this before. There's much to be done, and I'm just hoping to be able to get it done over the next few months once I've got another cohort on. I need another 3 cohorts. If I could get 3 cohorts, I can comfortably give up everything else and manage it. Whereas at the moment, I can't comfortably give it up, which means that 20 odd hours of my week are spent doing something else.
Working.
In order to make
It's
just about where and when, but we're going to keep going. We're going to keep at it.
Yeah, awesome. No, it's fab. Well, look, it's been really nice to speak to you, and I shall see you at our next little do.
Okay, great. I'll see you then. Thank
Take
you so
care.
much, Isla.